Welcome, everybody. I'm Love Coach Scott Catamas, and it is Straight Talk. Um, by the way, we're going to be changing the name. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. But it is a really important show. And you'll notice I've got more people on the panel tonight than we normally have. Usually, traditionally, I keep it to one or two other people. And certainly, every show we do is important. But I want to say that tonight's show, for me, is as important as any show we've ever done because so many of us are, I'm sure, have friends, clients, people that we know that are going through loss of friendships, loss of families, um, because they have different ideas and different belief systems. And Larissa and I had a lovely conversation yesterday, and we want to stop the social media civil war. That's
Yes.
what tonight is about. How can we stop a war that has begun? So I've invited several influencers, several global leaders, each of whom I respect, and each one has a different relationship to vaccination. And we're not here to argue pro or for or against. We're here to talk about how can we be true to ourselves, be true to our body, be true to our beliefs, and be open to those that have different ideas and different beliefs. And so I'm going to just briefly put the spotlight on everybody for a moment and then ask an opening question. And of course, I'm going to put the spotlight first on my partner, Trish.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the last few straight talks before we change the name. And I'm excited to tell you more about that later. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because, as Scott said, that it is not only is it an important conversation to have and to look into and ask yourself some of these questions, but also to find more compassion and understanding in the way that we're moving in the world. There's lots of things that are changing and the world is changing and we get to create a new world together. So I'm excited. I'm looking forward.
Thank you, Trish. This first came up when Larissa and I were talking a while back about what an issue this is. And Larissa Stowe, many of you have seen her on Saturday Night Live. She's an incredible musician, but she's also the leader of the Shakti Love Warrior tribe and someone that a lot of people look up to, who leads a daily group, a daily meditation group. Sometimes she does it, sometimes her people do it. And thank you, Larissa, for your dedication to being a leader with integrity and vulnerability. And that's something I want to say that I love about Larissa is that she's very humble and very vulnerable and very real, as we're probably about to see later tonight. I'm really grateful that Bruce Lyon joined us. Bruce is coming to us from New Zealand. It'll be interesting to hear about some of the dynamics of what's going on for you in your country. Bruce is the co founder of ISTA and also an incredible leader that so many people look up to and someone that I have tremendous respect for. So, Bruce, thank you for giving us some of your time. Really looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
Hi, Scott, and greetings from a beautiful afternoon here in New Zealand.
Are you on your island or?
No, I'm on retreat.
Oh my gosh. Bruce has a family home and they have their own island where I've been blessed to be a couple of times and it's incredibly beautiful. 300 sheep and Bruce and whoever gets to be visiting Bruce at the time. So it's great to have you coming to us from that beautiful vibration. Thank you. This is Michelle Anderson, and she's, of course, a very popular radio and television personality. She's been on our shows and Alan Steinfeld's show. We're going to see Alan in a moment. And again, Michelle, you're an influencer. A lot of people look up to you, and we were just talking prior to coming on and starting this. And again, I so appreciate your commitment to acknowledging and accepting everybody and seeking to understand. And it's really great to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me here. I didn't feel like I stood up with all of you, and when you say I'm an influencer, I've never really considered myself that, but thank you. And everything that you've shared about the other guests so far really inspires me, because especially because I know Larissa and how she is flowing with the energies right now, and she's somebody that I look up to. So, and I can't wait to hear from the rest of you.
Beautiful. Well, there's a great line in Life of Brian, the Monty Python movie, where everybody thinks he's the Messiah, and he's not. And he's trying to say to people, I'm not the Messiah, I'm not the Messiah. And then somebody says, only the true Messiah would say they're not the Messiah. So he thinks to himself, he goes, okay, I'm the Messiah. And he goes, he's the Messiah, he's the Messiah. So we can all decide only a true influencer would not say that they are an influencer.
Yes.
Well, here's Alan Steinfeld, and I certainly think Alan has a tremendous influence. His New Realities YouTube channel, and Alan, you feature so many of the people that are on this panel, and
Right.
thank you for joining us.
Well, this is a worldwide situation we are all faced with. I mean, not to kind of put a little down thing on it, but we are in a world war and we're in a civil war.
Yeah.
And that just kind of covers the scope of this. That means that something new is about to be born as we move through this bardo, this passage, this moment of transformation. So can't take sides. It's just like, how's it going to all unfold? And we have to just put out our highest intention to make something happen.
That's really well put. You're absolutely right, Alan. Absolutely right. And then finally, our other panelist is Sadiq. And Sadiq is also a very powerful guy who's always doing a lot of amazing things. And it's interesting to have you with us because you are really dedicating yourself to a health freedom movement. And so again, I'm going to be eager to hear about your health freedom movement and how you're working inclusivity within what is certainly a strongly activist movement. So it's good to have you with us, Sadiq.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
So here's the opening question. When Larissa and I were talking yesterday, we were talking about how we all want peace in the world. We all want more love. And what if that first step is for each of us to notice our own judgments? Notice when do we think we're a little bit smarter than our family or our friend? When do we think that we're more politically savvy? When do we fall into even having an enemy image of someone else because of their political belief or their stance? And so now that I've established, I believe you're all global leaders and influencers, here comes the humility question. And I'll start with myself. Where can you find within yourself moments where you slip into self-righteousness, where you slip into judgment, where your political or spiritual belief gets in the way of seeing someone else as an equal or as equally wise or equally valuable? So I'll start with myself, and I'll say that I really struggle and have fallen into self-righteousness of feeling like people that still support Trump are less conscious than I am, and I fall into that trap. And I have all my evidence about all my perception of his dishonesty and such. And I have to watch that. I have to recognize that, of course, that the people that still follow Trump or believe in Trump are doing so for a reason, and that's meeting their values. So that's where I struggle, and that's where I have to, I'm still working on it, and I'm not there yet. So I'll just start off with that, and I'll just open it up round robin to hear each of you where you sometimes notice you struggle, perhaps.
Well, Scott, I just want to say something about what you just said. I think it's human to have judgments, and I think we all do. And I think we can't try to be more spiritual and try to get over our judgment, but we don't have to act on those judgments.
Thank you.
So I have judgments about some of the same things you do. And it's like, okay, and that's their truth. And I still have those, but I'm not going to make myself wrong because Yeah, those people are different than me. And that's the problem. We want to fix someone because we don't like our judgments about our judgments. And so, right, there we are.
Beautiful, beautiful way put.
Well, we can talk about where judgments come from,
Mm.
which is a personal and independent understanding of the individual wants, desires, and values. I mean, and that's if we can just think about it from there. So I have like most of my family doesn't believe anything that I believe. And yeah, I have judgments there. I have judgments because I'm socialized in that particular manner to have that and to actually consistently dissolve the judgments means that I'm consistently looking at and questioning my own wants and desires and my values. So totally have judgments. And I would say that not having a judgment would be, I mean, whoever doesn't have judgments, how do you do that while living in the world and not, like interacting with other people? Because that's a practice that I would love to continue to cultivate, as much practice as I have cultivated in empathy and compassion. But that's things that drive me as well. I'm driven by making the world a more kind, sexy, loving place. And that's also pieces of like my judgments of like, oh, there's these places that aren't those things. Where can I go there?
Mm.
Yeah, well, I personally find that judgments when they are fueled by shamanic realities. So I don't have so much problem with judgments at the level of mind or heart, but when somebody deeply threatens emotionally, erotically, survival, then I can find my judgments becoming less loving. At the moment, I'm having a situation where I live on the island, the company that own it are trying to pass a vaccine mandate. So all of a sudden it's come down to where I live. And I notice that my judgments are a little bit stronger when I'm triggered in terms of my own personal animal security on the earth. And I think this is what's partly driving some of the deep conflict in the world is the fact that it's touching people's fear of death, and it's touching them in places that are unconscious, and that's driving underneath their judgment.
Absolutely. I think that is totally where most people are coming from right now, is this issue about safety. And when people's value of safety feels threatened, then we tend to react and get triggered really easily. But one of the things we're talking about with judgment, I think is really interesting, is that I know for myself, is I find myself judging myself, in different times of the day. Like it'll just rise up and I'll be aware that I am being self-critical. And if that is happening all the time here and there throughout the day within myself, then obviously it's going to be really, really challenging to be able to relax when somebody has a different opinion about what safety means for them, and they're challenging what safety means for me. So if we're going to be able to stop this, what we call a social media war right now, to be able to drop into ourselves, I think is really the starting place. And Scott, you were sharing about that, that you had that realization when you were working with Marshall, and he was talking to you about that. I thought that was like an amazing story where he asked you to look at your own judgment and how many times you have judging thoughts throughout the day, right?
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, it really does come down to that. Like, how are we going to be able to be open to one another if we're having a hard time being open to ourselves to begin with?
What she's referencing is a big turning point in my life was when I was traveling with Marshall Rosenberg, and this was 2001. And, I thought of myself as this really loving spiritual guy. And he said, well, okay, if you really want to, grow, just make a commitment to notice how many judgmental thoughts you have each day. And judgmental thoughts might be a compliment. It might be, oh, wow, she's sexy, or he's really smart. That's still a judgment, right? Um, and I was shocked to notice that I had well over 100 judgmental thoughts each day.
Mm.
And I like what Alan said. It's okay, and I still have the judgmental thoughts. The difference is that now I usually notice that, oh, there I go. Oh, there I go. Oh, there I go. And then, like Alan said, the key is not to act on it, and not to then make my judgment a prison sentence of someone, and not to go in the direction of making that person an enemy image, right? I may not like that person, I may not condone what they're doing, but I don't have to turn that person into an asshole or a bitch. I can just acknowledge I don't like, it's not working for me. The choice they're making doesn't work for me. It doesn't meet my values. And that's a constant practice.
Well, Marshall Rosenberg always said that we all have the same needs and we all have the same values. We just have different strategies for getting those needs met. And but can I just tell you one thing? I know other people want to share that I had a really hard time with, and well, maybe you could relate. I was at a conference talking to these people. These two very nice, intelligent women were sitting next to me, and I think it was just sort of around the election or after the election. They come over and they say, or we're talking, they say, Biden is a clone, don't you? And it's like, and they're serious. And I just sit there with my, really, you really think that? He goes, sure, it's obvious. And it's like, I don't respond because I know they're not in a position to hear because they're so set on their ideas. And, I'm just sitting there with my mouth open. I say, oh, okay. I mean, it's like, and they were so fixed in those ideas. I did judge it, but I couldn't even respond because it's like, here's intelligent people. And to me, maybe I'm the idiot, but they're believing something totally ridiculous. I also said to this other woman once, you know how ridiculous all this stuff is. People think Michelle Obama is a man, and this woman is talking to says, well, I sort of think so too. I say, really? It's like, how do you? I mean, these to me, I mean, I might lose a lot of audience, but I think those are little off the wall statements. Maybe some people here. So. This is so out of touch with the reality. I mean, I believe in UFOs. Maybe people think that's ridiculous. So, it's when you're up against somebody or people that are so in another camp, I'm beyond judgment. I'm just stunned. And I just putting out there because I don't know what to do with that, but I'm shocked and almost horrified, could I say?
Well, this coming from someone who is famous for talking about ET and making contact.
Right. It's
coming from someone who's got making contact over his right shoulder. As well.
Exactly. That's ridiculous to a lot of people. I know. So
yeah, to a lot of people, it's like, oh, come on, right?
I know. We all have our different needs and values and ideas. So
but it's a great question. I want to hear from Michelle and Sadiq because we haven't heard from them yet. But it's a great thing for us to explore. How do we manage when somebody's reality is so radically different than ours? And so let's definitely get there tonight. I also forgot to acknowledge all of our people in the Zoom room. We've got like 40 of our participants, a lot of people that I recognize. So welcome everybody that's in our Zoom room. Also welcome people watching on Facebook. And I want to acknowledge that the majority of the people who watch this show actually watch the replay. So if you're watching the replay, welcome. Everybody is welcome. I will do my best to get to the comments in the Zoom room and in the Facebook page. And I also will go back and review. I would love to hear from Michelle and Sadiq. Anything you want to share? We're already kind of...
I do. One of the things I ask myself, I ask myself when I'm feeling a judgment is how can I make this an observation rather than a judgment? And the way that I know that I'm feeling that sense of I'm judging someone else or I'm in that place of judgment is that I feel triggered and I feel an emotional charge. And so I'll ask myself the question, is my need to be right greater than my need for peace and harmony in this moment? And sometimes it's harder than others to let go of that need to be right, because like Alan was saying, he'll hear something from someone and be like astounded at their point of view or their perspective. And I've found myself in that place many times in this last, almost 2 years. But also realizing that if we were all exactly the same, this world would be a very boring place. And it's, if we can let go of dividing through our differences and really uniting through our similarities, so that we can move through this with, I'm always calling for ease and grace. Just how do we do that? How can we move into ease and grace? And I really feel that it comes to a sense of surrendering that judgment. And if we can surrender into kindness and empathy and compassion and change the judgment into curiosity. So, like Ellen, when you said some people think Michelle Obama is a man, I get really curious about that and say, tell me why you think that. I'm really curious about that. Or why do you have your belief that one president is better than another president? Or just to open the dialogue and being very aware and mindful of what's happening in the body while that's going on, because sometimes, we do feel that trigger in our gut, in our heart. And how can we turn that around into acceptance of another person's opinion? Because we want to be accepted. Every one of us wants to be respected and accepted. And if we can move to that first before we're getting it back, we may change the tide.
Michelle, I want to just remind you gave 3 really valuable tips just now. Choosing, noticing when am I stuck on being right, and what's more important, being right or having quality connection. That all of us want to be accepted. We all want to be accepted. We all be cared for. And the big one, be curious. When that judgmental thought comes up, when we go, that's crazy, when we think someone is crazy, get curious. Where did that crazy come from? I just saw a meme today from Dr. Seuss that said, everybody's weird. And when one weird person finds somebody that's compatible with the weirdness of another, we call that love.
I think I saw that meme.
Yeah. So, Sadiq, we haven't heard from you yet, so I'm going to pop the spotlight on you and see what you'd like to share as an opening thought.
Yeah, and I want to actually speak to one of the comments that is in the chat from one of the community members, John Carter, because he actually spoke to where I was intending to go in my share. He said, but if a judge makes a judgment, that becomes law. And what's alive for me around this is I don't see judgment as a good, bad, negative thing. It's just a part of life. A judgment is a part of reality. In fact, judges are some of the better paid positions. What our relationship, as has been said by a number of people on this panel, what our relationship to the act of judgment, what our relationship to judging is, I think, is critical as far as whether doing so causes harm or creates healing. I think that there can be really powerful judges, and I think the difference, from my perspective, between judging from an unwholesome place and judging from a wholesome place is just that specifically, which is as we judge, we're actually taking the whole into perspective. We are being wholesome, we're being holistic, and we're not judging to create right and wrong. We are judging to create peace. We're judging to create wholeness. And so for me, like, I honor my judge all the time. And one of the things that has been really powerful for me through this entire experience is, one of the hats that I wear is I'm the founder of the Global Peace Organization. And so when this issue became as prominent for me as I did, I knew that because the left tended to have a very different perspective than what was alive for me, I knew that I would be losing a lot of friends. I also knew that it would be very dangerous for my work. It would be very dangerous for, all aspects of my life. And I also knew for myself that there's a judgment call that I had to make to be in integrity with myself. And what's been fascinating to me is that one of the biggest gifts of this entire thing is, like, some of my biggest bedfellows right now are right-wing conservative Republicans, people who I never in the past would have, been co-creating with. They, in my experience in the past, were not the first people to jump to the table of world peace. They weren't the first people to jump to the table of calling people together. And now I'm getting a really blessed opportunity to sit with some amazing conservative folks that I never would have had the opportunity. And for me, I'm finding, like, my attachment to my judgments has become really minimal at this point, because I'm constantly around people who definitely do not think like me. It's been a big blessing.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for your opening thoughts. Sadiq, if there's anything you can do to improve your internet, you were freezing up on us a little bit there. So if there's anything you can do to improve the internet, that would be great. A thought about the word that comes to mind is discernment. And so maybe differentiating between discernment, where we're making conscious choice, versus judgment, where we feel the need to add a judgment of another in order to justify our choice. Right? It's kind of like, no, Scott, I really don't want to be on your show tonight, but thank you, best of luck with the show, but I've got other plans. Versus, oh man, that show sucks. I don't want to waste my time with it. Right? It's like we can make the same communication in two different ways. So being discerning without judging. Here's the next topic that I'd love to hear how you handle, maybe starting with Bruce, because it's kind of what he said stimulated in my mind. So how do we manage when we are really experiencing our personal safety being threatened, when our reptile brain takes over, or when we notice our reptile brain is getting activated, finding that balance of protecting ourselves, or perhaps even protecting our family, while setting boundaries, while being compassionate, and finding that balance, and again, doing it without going into make wrong. So, Bruce, I'm going to see if you want to tackle that one first. And you're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I'm unmuted now. Okay, so yeah, this one is close to my heart, because I feel like there's judgment and there's discernment, but then the thing that causes the problems that we're all facing is that when somebody's judgment is combined with power, and then they feel that that judgment needs to be applied to others. It's fine when we all feel our own freedom and not affected by other people's judgments. It's quite different when we start to feel that our personal safety is dependent upon not only the beliefs of others, but their power to act those beliefs into law. And whether or not you're on one side of the vaccination debate, which says that people who are choosing not to be vaccinated are threatening the vaccinated ones, or whether you're on the side that says those people who are running agendas of coercion and bullying are forcing people to go against their freedoms, you get close to war. And I think that for me, one of the things that we've practiced and worked with at Haydn is how to have conscious war. because part of the peace movement over time has often been a denial of war, which is a very primal, fundamental, primal nature of human beings. In fact, James Hillman wrote a beautiful book called Our Terrible Love of War, which is basically saying, peace is not the absence of war. War is just a very inefficient way of doing peace. And so we don't know how to do conflict. And so sometimes we stay away from conflict and don't stand up for the things that really matter to us because we don't know how to do conflict. And we're afraid that it's going to escalate into war. And by the way, we have very poor role models with our politicians and our parents and our gender wars and all of these authorities that divide into left and right and then have an entrenched battle between polarities, instead of which what war should be doing is a deep cathartic expression which is designed to deepen into love. So when we disagree with people that we love, that's an opportunity to deepen our love because we've got greater investment. It's like parents of gay people having to confront their prejudices. We're much more willing to confront our own prejudices when we're met with people that we love having different views. The war aspect the conflict aspect comes when those views become imposed on others, and then up stands the human spirit. And I'm personally quite excited by what's happening on the planet because I feel like it's breaking us out of a somnambulation, a sleepiness to go through an initiation that humanity needs to make. But so my question is, how do we do conflict productively that deepens our love rather than creates great division? And so conscious war is a recognition that there are some things worth fighting and dying for, that actually there are things that are more important than emotional harmony with the people that you care about. So how do we make those stands without it turning into real civil war or real outer conflict? How do we battle if we need to in a way that deepens love? And so this is a practice that we regularly do every Tuesday at Haydn, which is like, this is Conscious War Day. You can call someone out, but you understand that you're not calling out the person, you're calling out the energetic. I mean, imagine if we could have public battles between the head of Monsanto and the head of the Greenpeace or whatever that fully went into their deep, empowered, passionate expression of the things that mattered to them so that we could all feel it and move it instead of have just this head conversation that goes on between lawyers. So how to be passionately in conflict in such a way that deepens our love, I feel like is a training, it's a technique and a skill that we haven't learned and we need to learn.
Wow, that was powerful, Bruce. I love you so much. I'm so glad you're here.
But how would you do war? Both sides think their safety is threatened, which is a basic human need. And so we're fighting for our needs, or supposedly, and you're threatening us with your behavior, and this other side saying the same thing. How do you do war with two sides that are threatening their lives in a sense, or their lives feel threatened? How would you do? I mean, I'm not practicing that.
Well, for me, what it does is it takes us down to our base center, and it makes you feel the deep difference between the prime directive that runs most of our culture, which is fear of death, which is on the surface, we're civilized and polite to each other, but you touch my stuff, you touch my girlfriend, you touch my house, and I'll kill you. And you don't do what I want, and I'll send in the tanks. So we're basically running society from a hidden fear and threat of death. So when you go there, when you go into that potential conflict, what you find is if you are really wanting to live the soul and the culture that's coming, you have to make love more important than your fear of death. And the only way you are going to do that is to be confronted with your behavior at the point of feeling like you're going to die, and in that moment choosing love. And of course that happens in a little way in every conflict that we're in, but it's going to happen in a large way in society.
I'm going to put the spotlight on Larissa because she runs the Shakti Love Warriors. And I'm just curious, Larissa, what comes up for you as you hear Bruce's passion and his wisdom?
a lot comes up for me. Like, first of all, I really appreciate when Bruce, when you're sharing about, being really passionate and coming from a place of, let's all get out there. Let's really talk about how we feel, and not be afraid to talk about how we feel. Let's not be afraid to disagree. For me, I don't consider that necessarily war. But I think you also said that as like a form of making love too. It's like to just like to fully bring yourself, forward in a passionately, and I would say at the same time, I'm feeling into this other piece too, which is, when we think of things think of speaking and engaging with each other as war. What that brings up for me is this feeling of pushing, pushing back and forth. Like a war is like, I'm going after you and you're going after me. And what I'm curious about is the feeling into how do we inspire one another to look at what is truly important to us, rather than feeling that it is this like, this feeling of war. That's certainly one way to merge. Okay. War is definitely one way to merge. We're either merging, through the heart and through lovemaking, or we're merging through war, and death is, a way to merge, obviously. But I think about if what I truly like, what's important to me is being honored for my own body wisdom, right? And I'm pulling that reality, putting my awareness on what I want and what I want to create in the world, rather than what I don't want, then that is, I think, a beautiful way to dance, perhaps, rather than this feeling of, war, which I'm not saying is the worst thing ever. There's a place, obviously, for that, because it's a part of who we are. But we have so many ways that we can choose to navigate in this life. I mean, we are so complex, and war is one way, making love is another way, inspiring and empowering one another to really honor our own heart wisdom, for me is the way I choose to go about it. I would rather find a way to dance, with one another in this life. So I focus on, okay, how can I pull that reality of the dance, rather than the war? So while honoring that, that there's that perspective as well.
I want to bring in a couple of comments because we have a lot going on in our chat box. And Jewel just wrote, for me, with unconditional love, knowing the source within each living being on the planet is the same. I've learned to love myself first. I change my judgments into a feeling that I'm experiencing. I feel it. It has been an ongoing process, observing, witnessing, integrating who inside of me is being reactive, feeling the fear, being insecure. And then I know now where my attention goes, my energy flows and grows. So I'm learning to become steadfast on placing my attention on my intention of creating my reality and being or becoming peace and love. So thank you, Jewel. And I'll read what Sadiq wrote, because since his internet's not going so well, he writes, I'm going to honor the fact that my internet connection is what it is and not be so attached to talking. If it happens, great, but I don't want to detract from the show in any way. So if my presence is more as witness and sharing some thoughts in here, I'm good with that. My ego is definitely not attached. God bless you, Sadiq. And we'll see how the internet continues to go. We do want to hear from you, even if it's one of us reading what you have to say.
Do you want to mention what Katrina wrote in our chat before the show? I thought that was a real.
Do you have it handy? Do you have it right there?
No, I have to find it. We can come back to it.
Yeah, I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Trish.
Yeah, I'll read Katrina's. Katrina, hey all, I'm bowing out for tonight. And what does FWIW mean?
For your information.
Well, thanks for educating me. Also, for your information, I'm loving the conversations Daniel Schmachtenberger and Tristan Harris are having on this topic. It's very challenging to shift the social media civil war when social media companies profit off the hacking the limbic brains of the mass majority of the population, engaging people with viral content, which is the most often upsetting and divisive. As Daniel and Tristan eloquently point out, our incentive systems are perverse when war is profitable, addiction is profitable, rainforest devastation is profitable. So many activities which destroy life and society are profitable. The change we need to change the social media civil war is radical change in the incentive system. In the meanwhile, I'm delighted to be among friends who choose to love, compassion, compersion, and a vision that seeks to swerve the whole of humanity and the planet. Namaste, Katrina.
Thank you, Katrina. That was Katrina Vallicourt. And actually, I'm going to read one more thing that she also sent to me privately. And that was that she had been reviewing what Marshall Rosenberg wrote. And this is kind of, be curious, this is kind of relevant to what Bruce was talking about, I think. Marshall wrote about there are 4 things that are required that create a dominant society where a dictatorship or a political regime can control the masses. And the 4 things needed are: 1, moralistic judgments, establishing that there's right, wrong, good, bad. The second thing is the concept of deservability, reward, and punishment. If you're good, you'll be rewarded. If you're bad, you'll be punished. Bruce is bad. He hasn't gotten vaccinated. Therefore, we're going to take away your life. You're not going to be able to travel to your land. It's a punishment model, right? Whereas the people who are vaccinated, they're good people. So they get to get on the planes and they get to travel. So there's that dynamic there as an example of what's happening in our current culture. Suppression of self. That's why what Jewel wrote was so important. When a society is suppressed and are not supported to reflect their feelings and their needs, their values. And then the fourth and final thing that creates a dictatorial situation is what the Nazis called Amtssprach, which is basically, I'm just following orders. It's allowing the bureaucracy to supersede humanity. And so I think that that's interesting to bring up as we look at the war going on in our world right now. And I want to say, I actually personally chose to get vaccinated, and I'm glad that I did. It was the right choice for me. I also am horrified that friends of mine, such as Bruce and some of the other people on this panel, who are choosing not to get vaccinated, are being ostracized and literally herded into a camp that sadly fits some of those 4 dynamics that created Nazi Germany. So I thought I'd bring that up, and I'm curious if anybody has a response to that.
My response is, I just want to know the truth. How many people are dying from this vaccinated? How many people are dying while being, we're not getting the truth on either side. It's exaggerated and it's very frustrating. And that's why we're at war. If we could lay all the facts on the table, people can make a wise judgment. But no, we get profiteerings on this side, we get political angling on that side. So it's like the UFO situation. It's obvious there's something here, but we're not hearing the truth. So we have to stand up, make accusations, and fight, because somebody's profiting from the fact that we don't want free energy. It's that same mentality, and that's what's wrong, my moral judgment, with corporate America, the corporate elite. Someone is making money off of other people's misfortune or denying the truth. And that's frustrating. And I have a lot of judgment about people who would do that, because why can't we just hear the facts? And we still don't know. There's this best-selling book by Robert F. Kennedy, The True Anthony Fauci. I mean, I haven't looked at it, but it's #2 on Amazon. So is Kennedy telling the truth, or is he fabricating that to get people on his side? I don't know. I'm not making a judgment about that. I haven't read it, but it is so extreme. And no one's just coming together saying, okay, let's lay out what's really going on here. That's what I want to know. So that's where I am.
And what happens when we live in a world where we are not going to know what the truth is? There's not going to be the simplicity of these are the real facts. How do we manage living in a world where there are so many different truths and so many different realities? How can we and this is a question for the panel, how can we compassionately understand each other when there is radically different truth? And it's always been that way, by the way. One little point. Think about all of the great archetypal events that have happened on this planet. They're always played out in such a way where we do not know what the truth is. We do not know if Jesus even lived. We do not know if he was crucified and resurrected. But boy, we sure have a lot of opinions about it, and there's a lot of beliefs about it. We don't know who killed John Kennedy still.
Right.
We don't know what really happened on 9/11. Talk to white people, OJ did it. Talk to black people, he was framed. So archetypal events always are played out in such a way where you never know what the truth is. And so how do we manage the fact that we do not know, and we probably might not ever know? And I see Trisha's giving me the finger.
All I wrote down, I mean, I've been writing down a lot of little thoughts, but one of the things was truth and safety are illusionary. It's just an illusion, right? So it's like when someone breaks up with you and you have to live with not having that understanding of what happened. You're just like, oh, now I get to deal with this. Living in this world is chaos. It's just chaos. I got vaccinated so I can go to sex parties. I just like to go have a wild ruckus time. And I can't do that unless I have this thing. So I'm like, ooh, what can make my life better here? My family is definitely on the other side, right? And instead of choosing violence with them specifically, there's other places that I'll choose war and violence in the ways that I choose it. But without them, I choose to sit with them in their passionate expression of what is true for them. I recently had COVID, 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah, recently.
And it was easy for me. I was like sailing through. I had a great time. It was like being grounded again. And I was like, oh, I'm going to take dance class. I felt great. My parents have COVID and they're really, really sick. They have a cough that makes them vomit. And they're fevering still after a week and a half, 2 weeks in, I think. It's the choices that they made. And what, to answer your question, Scott, to how do we come back to the compassionate place? I don't even know if it's what I would call compassion. It's not like I don't need to understand their perspective. It helps me to connect to them, but I don't need to understand everybody on this planet's their perspective on the whatever it is that they're doing in the world, their perspective of life. What I find is that there are 7.8 billion people, roughly, that have different ways of life. Now we can find and negotiate reality together and find ways to live in this fucking chaotic place, or we can just make it harder. I don't need the truth, because Bruce's truth and Scott's truth and Sadiq's truth and whoever my parents' truth, that's all different. I don't need the truth to make me feel comfortable, because I know that safety is an illusion. I can create that for myself in my own psychosis. So it's more of just, hey, how do I move through the world without drastically, violently hurting anyone? and how can I make it slightly better for the next person? Pick up the garbage emotionally, physically, just that. And I don't think that it's fair that we're hurting other people for their medical choices. There are people at the border who were forced to get hysterectomies. Mexican women getting forced to get hysterectomies. This is not a new concept. Like, medical oppression is not a new concept in this world. So we can fight for our freedoms that we shouldn't have to fight for because those are inherent to us. We're just fighting systems that create the oppression. Right? That's my thoughts on it.
I love you, Trish.
I have something I want to say about truth. If that's all right with you, Scott.
Yes, absolutely.
So I feel like one of the difficulties is the demonization, as you said. I don't think it's actually works to make Nazi comparisons with global leaders. I don't think it works to throw conspiracy theory at people who disagree. I think the taking it to an extreme makes a point, but it denies the fact that even in my country, even though I disagree with them, I think our leaders are loving people trying to do the best that they can, even though they may be caught up in a global situation. And I do think most of the people standing up for freedom or whatever, that they're genuinely good people. They get extreme, they become extreme because they're not listened to. And I feel like one of the big problems we have in our world is that we've defined truth in this kind of doctrine of the religion of scientific materialism, that we're using science, which is often mind disconnected from nature, power over nature, and we're making that the most important truth, and we're denying the shamanic reality. In fact, I really wish I could hear from more of the indigenous people of the planet who have shamanic wisdom that counters this narrow scientific materialism that we're using to beat ourselves and everybody else over the head with. So I really feel that the definition of truth has to be much deeper than our thin band of human beings who in white coats in laboratories who think they know something and have been fucking with the genes in the first place. I think that our truth is got to do with our relationship with nature as human beings that are part of this earth. And I want to say one more thing about the hypocrisy of this idea that we're doing it to take care of ourselves and look after the most vulnerable and so on. When you look at Africa, there's a 6% vaccination rate. We don't care in the white Western world about the most vulnerable. We care about us. We care about our own feelings. And certainly the most vulnerable on the planet would be nature, the species going into annihilation and extinction while we drink our lattes and buy Nike shoes, and we don't really give a shit about the vulnerable on the planet. It's only when it hits us and our own, precious freedoms that we stand up. So I want to feel a different dialogue about truth that includes everything, all of the life that's on this planet that we share it with, and not just about when we're threatened in our own personal environment.
Boom. Boom. Big boom. Yeah. Ellen, it looks like your mouth is moving.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's still just your truth, Bruce, which I agree with, but everyone has their own truth. Everyone, Ken Wilber says, worldviews dictate the actual world you live in. So if you're a fundamentalist, that's the world you live in. If you're someone who believes in nature, the power of nature, that's the world you live in. We are all living in different worlds. So I agree with your truth, but there's probably billions of people who are living a different truth, and we're not going to get them to believe what we believe. So we have to just accept their worldview is what it is. And then we form tribes of our worldview. We just have to not make war on these tribes unless you're making War Day. But, that's the problem. Worldviews create totally different levels of reality. And that's the situation we find ourselves in, confronting realities. And I don't have an answer for that. How do we deal with that?
Can I just give one rebuttal, which is
Yeah.
I agree that worldviews create our experience of reality. I don't think they create reality in the sense that when we believe the Earth's flat, that doesn't make the Earth flat. We've been revolving around the galactic center for all of this time, and it doesn't matter what we believe. There are external beliefs. We live within the worldview that we adopt. But there are realities beyond our worldviews, and those realities are powers. And I believe that those powers are actually operational, particularly at the moment. So yeah, just a slight qualification.
I have to say, I've met flat earthers and I've argued with them, but for them, the world, and it's very frustrating to say, well, what's underneath the flat earth? They are convinced that's their worldview and that's their reality. And it's, so I know what you're saying. It doesn't make it flat, but to them it does, which is unfortunate, but that's the world they're living in. So I'm with you, but there is no right answer ultimately, though. There is no, as Scott was saying, ultimate truth. There's only relative truths. And I think that's part of being in this 3D incarnational experience, perhaps.
So I had this lovely conversation with Larissa yesterday, and we talked about bringing up something, which I'm going to bring up now. We were going to wait until the end of the show, but it's a segue. What if this is a dream world, and we're all having a dream within a dream within a dream? And yes, there's group consensus reality. There was a UFO crash in Roswell, New Mexico, group consensus reality about that. And then there's individuated reality, all the abduction experiences that people have that are personal. It's a personal experience. And what if this is ultimately just a dream world and we're all here having this incredibly powerful dream, individuated dreams, collective dream, all for the purpose of learning love, all for the purpose of having experiences like going to the movies. Wow, I just had a lifetime as Bruce. I just had a life as Trish. I just had a life as, whatever it is. We each having our own. And ultimately, all the great spiritual teachers tell us there's only one unified field, which is what science tells us and which the spiritual teachers tell us. And we're all having these individuated dreams for the purpose of having the ultimate experience. And what if it really doesn't fucking matter other than how we treat each other? As best as I can tell, if it's a dream world and it's all a big thing, the only thing that matters is how we treat each other and how we treat ourselves. Because that is what is real in the context of multiple realities. And I see Larissa. I was going to put the spotlight on you, Larissa.
What if that is absolutely true, Scott? We we get really pulled into each other's realities and into each other's perspectives, and and yet each one of us is truly having this inside out experience. What if we are all making it up? What if we're making this all up? And if we are, how do we really co-create a reality where we do honor and we do experience the most loving, compassionate, fun? What about fun? Like, we haven't really talked about that. What about creating and collaborating and creating a world where it's creative, where that impulse that we have for conflict expresses itself, in creative, fun ways? How do we do that? How do we move this conversation that we're having, of seeing it from all these different ways and feeling so passionate about it? How do we bring that into like a symphonic experience where we're having fun and where we really honor each other? I think even having the conversation and asking these questions, can shift where we are speaking and feeling one another. Because I don't know about you, but I have a tendency when we start to have these conversations from the mental space, I start to go like this. I start to become really small because because I don't relate as much. That's not the dimension that I live in as much as I do in the dimension of love and play and collaboration and creativity. So I just keep dreaming the dream of, okay, how can we weave these different ways of being together in a way that creates something that we've never experienced before, that brings that much more love and joy to the planet. I'm a dreamer. What can I say? But that's the kind of dream I want to dream.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank
I'm
you.
gonna I'm gonna put the spotlight on Michelle in a moment, but I want to read some of the comments from our audience because there's some really wonderful on it, including Sadiq. Sadiq writes, "I find myself less and less interested in pursuing truth and more interested in falling in love, every day and in every moment. Being right is so overrated. Love is sexy as fuck. We could say that. It's straight talk."
My favorite word, Scott.
um, Trish writes, "Whatever reality or truth we live in, we impact each other. Absolutely." Jewel brought up a very wonderful one, and I love this bit. Think about that wonderful children's rhyme: "Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream." And isn't that amazing how that children's rhyme kind of summarizes the reality that we're talking about here? Just a couple more comments from our wonderful people. Mark Denisovsky points out, "I'm with you, Scott and Larissa. Yogananda wrote beautifully about the play of light that creates our experience. Life is a picture show. We're the actors." Um, and John Carter writes, "It's important to balance the right brain and left brain activities, and meditation helps us to do that." A lot of other people just saying yes, 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 and lots of love. So thank you, everybody. Michelle, I'm putting the spotlight on you because we haven't heard your wisdom for a moment or for a bit.
Oh, there's so many fascinating points of view, and I really appreciate every perspective here. Bruce, I love your passion and I relate with it. When we started on this journey, I feel like I stayed quiet because I wanted to respect all points of view. And I didn't want to make anyone wrong for having a point of view that was different than mine. And then all of a sudden I felt like the train had left the station and it was rolling down the tracks. And I was caught up in, oh my gosh, how people aren't seeing what I'm seeing. They're not feeling what I'm feeling. And I was feeling panicked and frustrated and angry. And, I didn't know how to handle all of that emotion that came up in me because I just wanted to shout from the rooftops, "Can't you see what I'm seeing? Don't you see what I'm seeing?" And I do want to bring up Nazi Germany. I know it's a touchy subject. I hear a lot of people throwing that around and then a lot of people being offended by it. And I'm adopted. My birth family were killed in the gas chambers. And on May 8th of this year, my husband and I got in a car accident. That's how I remember the date, because that was the night that my birth grandmother came through to me in a dream. And she's the reason why I'm alive, because I feel what she was transmitting to me in this dream, where she was not using her mouth or her voice. It was feelings that she was transmitting to me. And the feelings were overwhelming in the dream. I could feel how hard it was for her to leave her family behind to come to America. But what she was showing me was that she felt what was coming and she had to make a decision, and she left everybody she loved behind. And her mother and father and brother were the ones that were killed in the gas chambers. And they were a very affluent family, and they thought they could outlast Hitler, and they didn't think the whole world would buy into what Hitler was convincing people needed to be done, and that, you know, the Jews were dirty, or, you know, were going to transmit a sickness on other people, and they had to be killed. And a lot of the world agreed with that. And when I woke up from the dream, I texted my birth mother and I asked her more about this grandmother, Margaret. I said, how old was she when she came to America? When was her birthday? Was the first question I asked. And how old was she when she came to America? And my birth mom said, that's easy. She was 19 because her birthday was May 10th, 1920. And she celebrated her 19th birthday on the boat coming over in 1939. And it was just a few years later that her entire, you know, family was wiped out. And she never did see them again. And I wondered what I was supposed to take from that dream. Was I supposed to leave California because so many of my friends are moving to Texas, to Florida here in America? And I thought, this is affecting the whole world. And I don't feel that that dream was telling me to leave. It was just showing me the feeling of listening to your intuition. And her intuition told her she had to get out, and it meant her life. And I think there's a lot of people who feel that way right now, that it's not so much about medical freedom as freedom, you know, our freedom's being taken away from us, and people losing jobs because they have a gut feeling and they feel something may not be right for them. So I understand, Bruce, your passion for this, because I feel that as well. And I have started speaking up and just sharing my personal truth with people without, you know, without trying to make anyone wrong for the choices that they're making. But I do feel that in order for us to get through this, there has to be a way for us to dialogue around it with compassion. And when we're so emotionally charged, I don't think we hear another person's perspective. So, you know, I know that I'm like Larissa. What Larissa said is, when we start talking from the mental point of view, I feel myself contracting and constricting, because it's my heart and the brain and my gut, my intuition that's leading me. And right now I am confused about where all of this is leading. And it feels like it's, like you said earlier, Scott, it's a very important subject right now. I don't like to see us so polarized. And I don't feel that our medical, you know, decisions should be politicized the way that they have been. That's my own personal belief. There's a lot at stake. I saw Trish talking about the money. You know, she was, when I think Bruce was talking or someone was talking, and Trish was saying it's about, you know, profit. And I don't like to see us putting profit over people. That seems like a dangerous game to play. And you know, I just still have, when Bruce talks about nature and us being here on Earth feels like such a gift. We were gifted this planet to live upon, and really all of our needs are met without money if we didn't get into that money system. You know, that the food was here for us, the resources to build ourselves shelter, and our basic needs could be met. And all of a sudden it became about things and about money. And that seems like a very dangerous game to play. You know, I often say on our radio show that it seems like technology has surpassed consciousness.
Yes.
And unless we get that back in balance, it is a runaway train. I feel that humanity is facing our own extinction if we don't come back into a harmonic right alignment with nature. And nature is showing us a lot right now. And I feel it's our responsibility to pay attention to that.
Thank you, Michelle.
I just want to say, Michelle, you brought up the Nazis, and what the Nazis did very well was demonize people. And this is one thing Marshall Rosenberg says: when you demonize people, it's easier to kill them because they are less than human. So we have to realize, and Bruce even said it before, everyone's doing the best they can. We can't look at even Donald Trump or whoever as less than human. And if we could remember that they're doing, people are doing something because that's their need or that's their strategy to meet their needs. And they're not less than human. That's honoring each person for whatever it is that motivates them. So if I can remember that, I mean, just talk about me and not make that person less than anything that I am or all of us are, then maybe we could come to peace somehow in treating people as equal, as humans that are just trying to do the best they can with the information they have. And it's okay to argue and try to convince people and say, look at it this way. And I think that's fine. That's why we're all in this together.
Don't you think that little gem of a book called The Four Agreements is so needed right now to revisit these simple agreements, to be impeccable with our word and don't make assumptions and don't take anything personally, when we get in these dialogues, and to always do our best. And what you're saying, Alan, makes so much sense, that we are acting, each person is acting from a place of, I want to do what's right, or they have that opinion because they want to do what's right. A lot of people that I've been speaking with lately, I feel are, when they have a differing point of view than me, what I'm seeing in them is this sense of wanting to do the noble thing, wanting to be a good steward and do the right thing. And that's based on their perception of what is right. So I don't want to make people wrong for that, but I also feel like things are really getting heated right now, very, very, very heated. And it is scary to see what's happening in the world right now, and to feel that feeling that my grandmother felt when she had to flee for her life, because she knew that her life was in danger if she did not get out. But now, where is out in this reality right now? Where is it? I don't think there's any way to go. Where is there to go? It's happening everywhere on earth. And I think, we're being tasked to go within and look in those shadowy places within ourselves. And I love what, one of the things that Larissa shared so passionately as well is about the co-creation aspect. What we resist persists. I keep hearing that saying over and over again. And rather than putting so much energy and attention on what we don't want to see, why don't we come together with other like-minded hearts to envision the world that we want to see, and call that forward so that we do co-create that? I think we're that masterful. And a lot of us have just forgotten our own mastery and our own skills when we come together in that space of honoring and respect and compassion with the vision that we want to see, because we were gifted this planet to live upon. And, Trish, you're so sensual and tactile, and I feel that coming from you. And I want to feel all those yummy feelings that as we move forward, that we can live together in that way of sharing joy and passion and laughter. Larissa, in America here, we had the holiday yesterday called Thanksgiving. And in our home, we did something called Friendsgiving. And for anyone, there were a few people that didn't have a place to go to be with other friends or family, and our home was a safe haven for anybody, whether they were vaccinated or not vaccinated. It didn't matter. Just come to our house and be with people who wanted to share love and laughter and a good meal and joy. And it turned into a speakeasy. It turned into music and smiles and just, being with friends that wanted to share fun and joy. And I think that, even though the world seems so dark right now, if we can do our part to light up other people's lives and our own lives through things that make us feel really good, we're pulsing out those and emitting that frequency to the universe, and hopefully cultivating that vision for wanting more of that, anchoring in more joy in the world. It seems like I've noticed I don't laugh as much as I used to laugh. And that used to be something I did every single day. I always found something to laugh over. So I'd like to bring that back in and lift that vibration by bringing in more laughter and more love. And I just really think that's part of the way forward.
I'm going to gallery view again. Bruce, we haven't heard from you for a little while. And everybody, as each person speaking, oh my God, I love Michelle. Oh my God, I love you, Larissa. Oh my God, Bruce. And obviously everybody's sharing is powerful. What are some of your thoughts and reflections on what you've heard tonight, Bruce?
Yeah, I think I want to, for some reason in this dialogue, I'm holding up the banner of passion and war. I want to point out that it's only Tuesdays that we have conscious war. The other days are full of inspiration and many other things. But I do feel that the power of passion is important in the world and at this time. I do think learning how to be deeply powerful in one's body as well as in the heart and in consciousness is important, because one of the things you could say about the 60s, and many of us lived through it, is that they didn't really get much higher than the higher solar plexus sometimes, that the light and love was not deeply embodied. It wasn't imbued with the sacrifice that actually comes when you stand up and prepared to live or die for love, for what's deeply moving in the core of your heart, not just for beliefs, which are easily interchangeable, but for love. And I feel that there can be a kind of a bypass of what it costs to live as a human for love. And that along with the passion that makes us stand up is the same power to make us feel. I'm looking out at this ocean and a hill, current and forest. And these are beings that are such an intimate part of my life, the heartbreaking beauty of what it is to live vulnerably on this planet, feeling everything, means that we also have to feel, along with the beauty and the joy and the radiance of creation and this amazing thing that's been given us, we have to feel the suffering, and we have to feel the tension, and we have to feel people locked in their homes, like going crazy and hurting each other. And it's hard. And sometimes it's easier to just kick up to a level where we're above it all. And I think the danger sometimes of that we're in this dream, this artificial reality metaverse that's coming, is that it's so disconnected from the dream of being a plant, or the dream of being a stone, or the whole material world is also part of that dream, and so are our emotions. And so I feel like when people have had enough and they're desperately looking inside them to see what matters to me and what am I willing to stand for and what am I willing to live and die for, I think that's a good thing. I just wish that we had better training in how to access those passions in a way that deepened our love with each other rather than create a division.
It's beautiful.
I love what you just said, Bruce, because I was over here texting Scott. I was like, but I want to have all the other feelings, and I want to have I I don't want to just live in a world with deep joy. I don't know if my plant friends or the chickens that I have over here or the cat lives in that kind of, I don't want to live in bliss all the time. Here's an example. My stepfather died last week, and I'm in a lot of pain. I cry a lot. It hurts. And I don't want to not feel that. Like the way that he lived in my cells are reorganized, and they're somewhere else in my life, in my body and in my brain, and the space that's there, I want to feel that. Like I want to have the anger. I stuffed it for 27 years. I don't want to not do that anymore. Like that's the joy of being human. I want to stub my toe and bleed. I want to like step on a rusty nail in the middle of the summer. Like I want those things because that's what makes it juicy and exciting. And I want to get mad at Scott because that's what brings us closer together. I don't want to abuse him. I don't want to hurt him unless he asks for it, like I don't want those things, but I want to find ways that we can be loving in conflict and use the conflict to deepen. Like, and I did write in that my definition of love, because you said love multiple times, and I'm curious what your definition is, but my definition of love is the radical acceptance of what is.
Yes.
Can I love the crazy? Can I love all of the stuff that's happening that makes me like angry? Can I love that person even though I'm like, I could strangle you? I'm not going to, but I'm going to just sit here and just love you in your experience and expression of what's your values. And that's what I come back to is just to sit with and expand my heart in whatever we started with judgment, whatever that was. And I just get to manage my proximity to that person, to my violence, right? I'm like, I'm not going to step into a conversation with my parents around politics that I know is going to create a violent expression in them. They're old and sick. I'll pick and choose my battles. I'll pick Tuesday, right? Is that Tuesday?
Yeah. In a moment, we're going to do one last round. Everybody can kind of give their final thought. And I actually am going to tell a story, which I shared with Larissa on the phone yesterday, and I cried when I told the story. I don't know if I'll cry tonight because people are watching, but I thought of it because I came up with Larissa, and it was interesting what Bruce was talking about, how, in the 60s, the movement, let's face it, people got lost in sex and drugs. And the idea that the movement, and there's a whole theory that the CIA actually got a lot of drugs into the counterculture to keep us disorganized, which may or may not be true. But here's a really beautiful story. So, the government of the United States government will release documents after a certain period of time. They'll determine for security purposes, these, presidential documents can be opened in 25 years, these in 35 years, these in 50 years. They recently, or actually a few years ago, opened up some of the documents of what took place during the Nixon White House. And what came out was this extraordinary story, which is true. It's a true story I'm about to share with you. The scene is around 1968, and America is losing the war in Vietnam. And on a rainy day, Pentagon officials and the Secretary of Defense come to the White House and present a plan to President Nixon to use nuclear weapons on Hanoi. And they've got it all worked out. They've got the plan, but as commander-in-chief, he has to give it the okay. And that particular day, he had been out, and when his limousine came back in, he saw all these hippies out in front of the White House in the pouring rain, protesting the war. And he said, if they're out there in the rain protesting the war, what the hell is going to happen? How crazy is it going to get if we use nuclear weapons? And he said no. Now, what to me is so powerful about that story, and what sometimes makes me cry, is those kids out there in the rain have no idea the impact they made. Most of them probably thought, this is bullshit. No one's paying any attention to us. We're just sitting out here getting soaked and nobody's listening, nobody's paying attention. But those kids being out there stopped nuclear weapons from being used. They changed the world, and most of them will never know it. And so it is, I believe, a dream world, and it is complex, and there is no one truth. And it just comes back down to tuning in and aligning our higher self, our God self, with our ego and our personality. What do I feel called to do? What is the movement of my heart? What is the wise move? What am I longing for? And to go toward what we long for and how we can show up at this time. Because it is an apocalyptic time. It is the time that humanity must wake up. Whether it's individual, group, we'll see how it plays out. But let's just remember those kids in the rain changed the world. They changed the world, and they don't even know it. So that's the story I wanted to tell. And I'd love to turn it over to each of you to share whatever final thought, story, idea comes to your mind. And I love each and every one of you, and I'm so grateful that you all are spending Friday night here. Or in Bruce's case, Saturday morning.
I'll speak. And I just want to acknowledge you, Scott, for creating this space for us to have these conversations. I think this is so important. I don't hear these kind of conversations happening in the world. And even with, those of us, there's some passionate, where we look at it in different ways. We bring different flavors to the table, and we're sharing in ways that are honoring to one another, and respectful of one another. And I would love to see so much more of this happening in the world. I would love to hear us have many more conversations, and people who are all about the vaccine, and people who are choosing not to have the vaccine, and why, along with a lot of different conversations to where we can share and be respectful. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I say we do this a lot more. I don't know if you all feel the same way, but I think these kind of conversations could really change the world.
Beautiful. I'm a yes. Thank you, Larissa. Yeah, let's continue this. Alan?
I just want to say your story about the Vietnam and dropping that bomb, I never heard that, and that would have been definitely a game changer for the planet. But it sort of reminds me of that Dr. Seuss story, Horton Hears a Who, this little speck of dust, and Horton with the big ears, he's an elephant, they want to throw this piece of dust in the garbage, and he hears a little sound from it, and he's saying you need to make another sound so people don't throw you away into the garbage or whatever it was. So all the Who's in Whoville needed to come together and shout, and one little Who didn't shout, and that made the difference. Until that little Who shouted, that's when they were heard and recognized there was a little bit of life on that speck of dust. And maybe this little speck of dust needs to shout and
It's 12 o'clock.
Sorry, that's my computer. It's the final hour. We are reaching the final
We're at
hour.
the final hour, right?
Well, we're at the 12 o'clock. I know I have to stop my computer from doing that. But yes, we are at the 12. We are 2 minutes to 12. And so this is all falling apart, coming together, being confronted because the old world was not working. Something was awfully wrong with that model, and it's all being torn apart and broken up and being confronted. You know, in complexity theory, if when things get to be so complex and complicated that you need to go to another level of order. But if you don't have that underlying order there, the whole system collapses. But if you do, it rises to another level and it becomes more functional. But it has to collapse, and we're seeing the collapse of something. And underneath, this is the conversation that starts to rebuild a higher level of order. And we just have to have it out, war day or not, and 6 days of love. But we have to confront the issues and talk about them and say, something's wrong here. Al Pacino and Justice for All, there's something wrong, something very, very wrong here, but we have to at least address what's wrong. So thank you for bringing out letting the ability to talk about our flaws, the dark side that you've been doing with Trish for the last year on this program. Let's talk about it all and go get over the shame and just confront the realities that all of us as human beings have to face. And this is a major point for personally, families, you know, cities and planet. This is a big one. And so thank you.
It's a powerful time.
Yeah. I'd love to hear what Sadiq was saying, some good things in the chat. I would love if we can get his
Yeah. Let me read a couple things. You know, Mark wrote something, and I'll go up and I'll read Sadiq's also. Mark writes, "This conversation is an energetic template for connection in the collective consciousness. If we open ourselves to the possibility of understanding and respect, we can all gather together to begin the healing. I wanted to, but I didn't say smash the oligarchic patriarchy. See, I'm learning." Thank you all. Oh, thank you, Mark. That's beautiful. Sadiq writes, he's talking about his conference. He's got the Great Assembly that's taking place soon. He's got a big event on 1/11/2022, January 11th, 2022 in Sedona, Arizona, but it'll also be going on online. So lots of details on that. I'll save the chat box, and I'll send it to all of my presenters. If anybody can't save the chat box, private message me on Facebook and I'll send it to you.
His remarks on genocide, I thought were really interesting in that chat box, the 6 levels. Do you see that if you go up?
Oh, right. That there are 10 steps to genocide and we're at the 6th. We've reached the 6th level. And again, it is heavy-handed to do the comparison to Nazi Germany, but we also have to learn from it. And I was married to, Suchi was German. Her father was in Hitler's junior army. And Germany was a very intelligent nation. And we look back and like, how could that have happened? So we have to learn from these things, not to be heavy-handed, and not to demonize somebody on the other side of our beliefs, but just to recognize, whoa, you know, how did it happen then? And let's make sure it doesn't happen again. Final thoughts from Trish, and then Bruce, and then Michelle.
My final thoughts in just my journey through all of this, I've been writing them down, is can we be with the discomfort of life? Like, can we just be with it, to just hold it, and to not try to fix it or change it? Because again, that is also part of the judgment, right? As long as you're creating a separation between you and whatever is, then that's still the separation. That's still like if I'm not able to hold someone's anger or sadness or my own even, then I'm still separating myself from what that is. And I know that I'm not separate from the glass, to the being, to Larissa, to Scott, to the grass on the ground. And when we start to expand into the consideration of that, then I feel like it's just more loving. remember my definition of loving. And also finding I want to bring up something that Sharif Abdullah said in our show a while ago, and it's been on my mind this entire time. Is his whole piece, he has a 12 steps to, what was it? Was it 12 steps to, oh crap. Well, I'm losing that right now. But one of the pieces that he said to me, or said to Scott and I, was about contentment, and to be able to find contentment in the moment with what you have. So to consider your consumption, like just to sit back and consider your consumption of someone's energy, their time, their, how you behave with someone else. How do you behave with the earth? How do you behave with the animals and the things that you eat? Are you honoring it? Like Michelle and Larissa would say, is like, can we honor in that space of what is? Can I honor your passion and your anger? And can I honor the warring inside of you? Can I honor that? Can I actually just be with it? Because I feel like that is the place where we can make change. Because we're no longer creating the separation. We're finding contentment. We're being with the discomfort of life. That's my thoughts. Oh, hate is not the absence of love. Just saying.
Hate is not the absence of love. That's right. So there were 7 panelists, just like there's 7 days of the week. And I recognize that Bruce got Tuesday, the war day. So Bruce, thank you for holding that space. And it is just 1 day of 7. I love you, Bruce. What are your final thoughts for tonight?
Well, a couple of thoughts. One was, Trish, I loved your definition of love as the radical acceptance of what is, something like that. And maybe an adjustment of that that's not so human-centric for me would just be love is what is. So in other words, when we align ourselves with what is, we find that deep radical acceptance. So I also want to say something about power and influence, this idea of influence being, that lots of people follow you or look up to you or whatever. But to me, the deepest experience of power is in the silent choices you make in the core of your own being, in the core of your own heart, that nobody gets to see, like those kids in the rain. They've got to do with whether or not we decide to be who we are and to show up for the love that we are, regardless of the consequences. And I believe that in an initiatory process like we're in on the planet, many people are going to get that opportunity in the crisis to decide who they are and to stand for that. And the last thing I want to say is I really love being with people that I disagree with, that have totally different perspectives from me. I mean, that's what actually makes me grow and makes me come alive. So I'm trying to coin this new phrase, because we have uniformity, which is about everybody being the same and wearing the same uniform. And there's still a lot of that in the world. And then we have this long desire for unanimity, to get everybody to agree. It really comes from unanimous, meaning one soul. But we kind of want to enroll everybody. If consciousness of every 100 monkeys could, get together, then the whole world would transform, this kind of unanimity. But I don't think unanimity is going to happen because of the very things we've talked about. People have very radical, different experiences of levels of truth and growth and everything else. So I've looked for what's another uni word, and I found unicore, which is one heart. People of one heart, that beyond what their mind thinks or their situations or their race or their creed or whatever else, that they have one heart. And so that would make many of them unicorns, which I quite like. So it's been fun hanging with you unicorns, and I've loved feeling the spirit of heart here.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. It was awesome. Awesome.
Scott, what did you get from this conversation? From
Me?
tonight? Yeah, what did you get from tonight?
How much I love each and every one of you. Really, how grateful I am that I get to connect with you, share time with you, and that, we're all holding hands together in our own ways, saying, okay, this is it. This is this incredible time on the planet. I do believe that we're the ones we've been waiting for. I believe this is the time we've been preparing for. I believe that the next few years are going to be extraordinary and scary and wonderful and all of that. And I just, as each one of you speaks, like, oh my God, I love Bruce. Oh my God, Michelle is so wise. Oh, that's why Trish is my partner. Oh my God, Larissa, let's do it again. Let's do this tomorrow. You know, it's like, that's what comes up for me, Alan. Just my love and respect for each and every
Right.
one of you. Yeah.
Beautiful. Did you get any answers? Because you really wanted to make this was important to you. And did something sink in that was different now than it was before the show?
I can't say different, but I do think that everybody expressed things that are really important.
Yeah.
Michelle set out right at the beginning some of the most important things. Be curious, treat everybody with acceptance, and really tune in. Am I stuck in being right? And what's more important, being right or maintaining this friendship?
Right.
So I feel like, Michelle kind of like handled that early on, and that allowed us to get a little more philosophical.
Yeah. Thank you. Well,
Larissa, because you were who we kind of co-created this together initially. How was tonight for you? It was good for me. How was it for you?
It was beautiful, and I'm very grateful. I feel like we're dropping into a place that is is more important than we realize. Um, it feels, on one level, it's like, oh, we're just having this conversation, but on another level, like Alan was talking about, it's the little Horton hears a who. When we have these conversations, it could make all the difference. Just like the people who are protesting outside of the White House. We never know who is going to feel impacted by this. And I saw a comment in here that I loved. Where was it? The only coming together that is needed is compassion. And I thought, yeah, compassion, and I would also have to say respect. Compassion and respecting one another. So yes, I'm very happy, Scott. I just think we need to do this a lot more.
Let's
I
do a
feel like
lot
this is the
more.
most important thing we can be doing, is having these conversations that create bridges. And as we model hearing one another, respecting one another, while still maybe having different flavors of what's important to us.
Yeah. All right. I just want to let people know about what's coming up tomorrow night. It is Saturday Night Alive for the Global Peace Tribe. And so, of course, we're doing a show all about the powerful magic of gratitude. Deborah's on vacation. She's in Mount Shasta. But the Jan Kaplan will be with me. And we've got some really wonderful presenters. Paul Draper is going to do magic and great music with the brothers Corin and Sarita. And we're going to actually give everybody a chance to express what they're grateful for, our audience. So come and join us, especially for the early show. Come on in at 5:30 because we're going to be giving people both during the early show and the after show a chance to express what they're grateful for. And that's tomorrow night. And the other show, I do a show every Sunday. And I got a really interesting one this Sunday morning. So Connie is a direct descendant from the Mayflower, and she met Barbara, who is also a descendant from the Mayflower, but Barbara also is a descendant on another string of the original tribe that 400 years ago had the first Thanksgiving. And Andrew is a scholar. And so we're going to be talking about what historically actually really took place 400 years ago, and the actual original spiritual intention of the Puritans, of the Pocono tribe, and where that got lost in the history books made up by white people, and how to reclaim it. It's going to be a really interesting show, and that's my Sacred Sunday show on Sunday morning. So, and then finally, I'm going to bring Trish on with me here because Trish, can we tell people about our new title?
Oh, yeah.
So we're going to take 2 weeks off in December. There will not be a straight talk on December 24th or December 31st because that's Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. But when we return, we will return as
The Awakening World. I think it's way better than straight talk because there's nothing about me that's straight. It feels very offensive, Scott. I've been
really
working
is
on this for
struggling.
months.
It was easier for me as a straight man than for her as a whatever she is.
A whole lot.
A whole lot. A whole lot. So it will be the awakening world. And I absolutely, going back to gallery view, look forward to sharing the awakening world with each and every one of you. Individually, collectively, we will continue these conversations.
Great.
And
And let's do another show, Scott, on that. We'll do something.
yeah,
There's
definitely.
a lot of disclosure coming up in the news lately, major breakthroughs in the Congress bills and all that stuff that's come out. A new committee formed by the Department of Defense. There's a lot of Elizondo speaking out against this stuff. And this book, Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, is a best book on disclosure
Oh, wow.
that you could possibly read if it appears.
Let's definitely book to do that like the second
Okay.
week of January.
Okay,
Yeah.
definitely. Okay.
Love
Thanks.
you guys. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm sorry that we didn't get a chance to read everybody's comments in the chat, but we had these 7 amazing panelists. But God's blessings. Have a beautiful evening, and I'll look forward to hopefully seeing you all tomorrow night on Saturday Night Live. Good night, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks.